We're all wrapped up with day one of the NFL Scouting Combine, and oh boy, did those guys in the front seven make themselves some money. We're talking all things day one here on LOE.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, your only daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, bringing you 5 episodes each and every week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. I'm Gino Camilleri, Eagles expert, longtime fan, and scouting director here at the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thank you for joining us here, being an everydayer, making us your first listen. Thank you for liking, subscribing, following along each and every day. And this episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in bets if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And to get started today, we got to talk about the NFL Combine. Who performed well, why some guys chose to sit out, and what comes after this event. But first, man, this event, I don't know if you want to call these guys freaks in the best of way, a circus in the best of way, but for these guys at 300 pounds, some of them, to do the things that they do and move the way that they move, that might be a top hit that I just came out with, like in 1990, the chorus to a top hit right there. But in all seriousness, these guys are freaks, just absolutely insane athletes. To see where we are with edge rushers running 4.44 flat and seeing big guys at near 300 pounds run these 3-cone times that you were used to seeing wide receivers run. Hats off to the big fellas, man. They made themselves some money today, and it is truly something that I know I joke about saying that we're watching these guys perform in their underwear, but in all seriousness, you and I would try and do those things that those guys did in those drills today and look utterly foolish, and I would tear my hamstring trying to run a 40, and these guys are doing things that Olympic level track athletes train their whole life for in a matter of 2.5 months. And some guys performed better than others. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull it up, but I just want to hit on some of the guys that just absolutely showed out today. And you can follow along on YouTube. And if you would like to follow along while you are listening, go to the NFL Combine results on NFL.com. That's what I use to follow along. It's the easiest, most simple platform, in all honesty. I mean, it just shows the guys' pictures, has their name, and shows exactly how they did. So I got the big guys pulled up here. I'm looking at the defensive tackles, how the day started. I currently got the 20-yard shuttle pulled up, but I want to pull up the 10-yard splits. The top 5 guys in terms of 10-yard splits, Mekhi Wingo tested the best at 1.64. Rook Ororo tested right behind him at 1.67. Braden Fiske at a 1.68. Byron Murphy II at a 1.69. And tied with him was Jaden Crometti. And why I focused on this one in particular is because if you were listening to yesterday's show, I was saying that these defensive tackles, why this drill is important in particular is because none of these guys are running 40 yards downfield every single play, in all honesty. And if they did, they're probably going to run themselves into shape and no longer be playing at a defensive tackle weight. But the 10-yard split, for example, that's focusing on how quickly you can get your foot in the ground and get your first 3 steps to the quarterback. So to see these guys under 1.72 is phenomenal. I mean, anybody that's testing even under 1.8, T'Vondre Sweat at 362 pounds testing at a 1.8 10-yard split is absolutely banana land. But that's what you should focus on, and that's what I'm going to continue to focus on, is how each of these drills pinpoints particular things when it comes to play style for each of these positions. And then you think about defensive tackles as well. What else are they asked to do? So yes, they are going to get upfield in their gap. Then where do they go from there? Well, they might have to trail or track laterally. They might have to use a surf technique and get down the line of scrimmage, or they might have to put their foot in the ground, turn their hip, and go to backtrack and try and get the guy that is currently running the ball away from their gap. Braden Fiske running a 4.37 20-yard shuttle is dumb. It doesn't make sense how him and Logan Lee did that at their size. Shouldn't make any sense at all. And if you see on my screen, the next closest guys were 0.3 seconds slower than these two. When you talk about elite, that's what that means. When these guys are testing at the top of the bell curve, which I referenced yesterday, that's what that means. But heck, Jaden Crometti at 4.66, Gabe Hall at a 6.7, Mason Smith at a 6.9. It's not bad either. Heck, man, these big dudes on the interior are unbelievable. But so are these guys on the end. I mean, let's go to the 40-yard dash just to start. Dales Turner, 4.46. Chop Robinson, I said 4.44. I apologize. It was a 4.48. Insane. Mo Kamara, you probably haven't heard of him. Out of Colorado State. Insane production the last couple of years there. Jared Verse, one of the bigger names, 4.58. Chris Braswell out of Alabama, 4.60. These guys are running times that some wide receivers ran slower than. And you know what's even more freakish is what they can do in the 3-cone, because this shows off their ability to bend around the edge. But frankly, I don't know why so many guys are opting out of the 3-cone. But I wanted to focus on one guy, Marshawn Nealon, at that 7.02. That is a crazy good number. If you start to get into the 6.95s for this position, you're talking about like true elite of the elite. And Marshawn Nealon is very close to that area. I wish we had more numbers on the 3-cone. It's unfortunate, but we piece the puzzle together. But for those big guys, man, to see some of the guys on the interior running the way they did, and then some of the guys on the edge running the way they did, best of luck to quarterbacks, and best of luck to some of the running backs that these linebackers are going to be chasing down moving into the next couple seasons. You talk about 40-yard dash times for these guys. Payton Wilson at a 4.43. Payton Wilson, folks, is also a wrestler. He wrestled in high school. I believe he was offered to wrestle at North Carolina State, but regardless, he's also a linebacker who's going to be playing in the NFL, who can run as fast as most running backs. Kalen DeLoach, 4.47. Edgerrin Cooper, somebody that we have mocked to the Eagles here at LOE, 4.51. Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky, 4.51. Folks, I am not talking about linebackers, tight ends, or running backs, or wide receivers, tight ends, or running backs is what I meant to say. I'm talking about linebackers and defensive ends and guys that at one point were big, just elephant-like bouldering around type guys on the middle of the interior. And edge rushers were more, you had to be able to be like 280 pounds so you could play the run and be more of like a 4-eye type. And linebackers, they had the neck guards on. Not today. You got to be athletes. These guys showed what it means to be an athlete. This episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets right now with your first bet over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, and us here at LOE. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. And that bet can quite literally be on anything. It could be on player props, over-unders. If you're somebody like me who likes the parlays, can be on that as well. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with exclusive player props over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA, the Locked On Podcast Network, and us here at LOE. Rolling along here with this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Gino Camilleri, your host. Thank you for being an everydayer here at LOE, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. And if you haven't heard by now, Locked On has the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel on YouTube and on the free Fire TV channel in the Amazon Fire TV app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering all sports 24/7, quite literally at any time, no matter where you are in the world, any time zone. We have you covered, covering the Combine. NHL is going on right now. Find it on Locked On Sports Today. It's now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We'll be on there. Everybody else live from Indianapolis. They got coverage going on right now. And there were some guys that they covered today that showed up, but there were other guys that quite literally didn't even perform today. And one guy was Jeremiah Trotter. A lot of us Eagles fans were excited because we saw his pops play. We were falling in love with the linebacker position, and we're trying to talk ourselves into getting the next coming of Jeremiah Trotter. But no, tongue in cheek there with that statement. And I wanted to point at the fact I remember Kayvon Thibodeau a couple of years ago when he was drafted, not to run any of the shuttle drills, so on and so forth. And then you start to get into questioning of why it happened. And at the end of the day, nobody is going to know besides, I would say, 4 people: the player themselves, the head coach and general manager of whatever team they're interviewing with, and the lock and key that we don't talk about a lot. There's these individuals. They're called agents. You don't really see them unless they're named Drew Rosenhaus, and you quite literally see them all the time because he promotes himself all over ESPN, so on and so forth. But no, agents are a pivotal cog in the football machine, any sport machine, rather. An agent will advise a player on what they believe is best for the player in terms of a business decision. Let's look at Jeremiah Trotter Jr., for example. Why do you completely sit out today and prepare for your pro day on April 10th? We'll say that sentence out loud. Did that make a lot of sense for you? Why you would take an additional 40-something days to prepare? Are you out of shape? Is there an injury? Do you think the numbers aren't going to show out compared to the rest of the crop here? It's not a good look. I know we said don't ever kill anybody because of the Combine. Don't fall in love with anybody because of the Combine. But the puzzle, there are all these pieces, right? And if you're looking for a piece and you're trying to find out what's their athleticism like, why are they a good athlete? Does it match the tape? But I can't have that confirmation element of it. You go back to today. Hey, Jeremiah, why'd you sit out your pro day? And those people that we discussed, the scout who then tells the general manager and the head coach and the player who got the advice from his agent, only those individuals are going to know. From an individual perspective, that's more base to base. What's not good for the gander isn't always great for the goose, or however that dumb saying goes. That maybe the individual not testing isn't really going to kill him at the end of the day because they know that at their pro day, they could potentially test better. The film doesn't lie. Those are things that are real. Talk about Kayvon Thibodeau. Why does he sit out his 3-cone in his shuttle? Film don't lie, and I just ran a 1.5, 140. What more do you have to see? It's a business decision. Now, from a more macro element, I think the bigger concern is why the heck are so many guys sitting out the short shuttle and the 3-cone drill in a sport that's based on agility? I get that the numbers can hurt, and especially guys who are, let's say you're more stiff in the hips and you struggle to get down and you're going to test a little worse than somebody who might be a little more limber and might have an inch or two longer arms that might help you test better, or whatever your excuse is. I think on a grand scale, there's going to be some sort of major overhaul with the combine soon. The 40 will always be there. It's important. But there's been a trend away from this, away from these tests. That's all it is. It's like standardized testing. That's all this is. It's a standardized test. Why did we take the DBQ exam in New York State when we were in 4th, 6th, and 8th grade? Because it was a standardized test. We had to compare ourselves to the rest of the field. Now, do I like that? I could give and take it. I put more emphasis into the short shuttle and the 3-cone than I do the 40, simply because you can turn on tape and see how somebody runs in a straight line. But in those tight confines, like, I want to see you in that environment where you're doing football things without the pads on, because you can see how you could do it with the pads on, with film on. But at the same time, getting away from the standardized testing element and truly focusing on what is this player that I have seen with my eyes. And for football fans, like the true football guy, you should love this. You should love this phasing out away from this. Yeah, you'll still get the 40-yard dash. That'll always be there. Roger Goodell's going to get his paycheck, right? But they don't even televise the 3-cone and the short shuttle. Why are the guys going to do it? Yeah, take more time and prepare at your pro day. Smart. Why rush and do it the last day of February? There's no reason to do that. So from that perspective, I think sitting out, it might be a good thing. But from an individual basis, to sit out the entire combine, to go there just to interview, there are other places for that. There's the Senior Bowl. There's the Shrine Bowl. Heck, he could have came to CGS and did that. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. We offer that. But to do that today when a lot of these linebackers, Payton Wilson running a 4.43 official, teams are going to look at that. It's a double-edged sword. It's always good for the goose isn't always good for the gander, or however that stupid saying goes. Somebody can correct me on that. But as we continue to roll along, we're going to finish up what comes after this event. Yeah, we got the defensive linemen today, but now they're all done. What are they going to do in preparation for the 2024 NFL Draft with a little under 2 months to go? Wrapping up this edition of LOE. Come on right back. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. How's your social battery right now? It can be easy to ignore a social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially when social gatherings are picking up after the winter. Summer's right around the corner. You know more people will be out and about. What's the right amount of socializing for you? How do you recharge after that? Maybe you thrived around people and now you need some time alone. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. I have been using BetterHelp for quite some time right now. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapist for free at no additional charge at quite literally any time. If you want to find your social sweet spot today with BetterHelp, visit betterhelp.com/lockedon and you'll get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Once again, we thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Finishing up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Gino Camilleri, your host, as always, finishing up the show. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch every show 5 days a week. We're continuing to talk about the combine here. We got more combine action for you tomorrow. And next week, I'm sure we're going to talk about the combine as we continue to roll along here in draft season. But what happens after the combine's over? Just 4 days. It's like that vacation you look forward to, and time is just dragging at work, and then it gets there, and then by the time you know it, it's that next Monday you're back to reality and saying, man, that came and went in the blink of an eye. So what happens after all these guys get flown into Indianapolis? They have multiple guys weighing in. They do all these interviews. They do the on-field stuff today. And then once the on-field drills are over, they're done. They leave. So let's look at the defensive linemen, the linebackers, for example, who finished up their testing today. What comes next for these prospects? So it's currently February 29th. The next step is pro days. Pro days kick off exactly a week and some change from now. Let's track a player that was at the combine today, Brandon Dorless. He has his pro day in 2 weeks on the 12th of March for Oregon. He is going to continue to train, which he was doing up until the combine. A lot of what these guys do once the season ends, especially a lot of these top-level guys who get the combine invites, they're going to attend those games, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, CGS, which I attend. And then after that, they go to, I'm sure you've heard it on the broadcast. I heard Latu talk about it from UCLA, places like Exos, these training facilities where they quite literally go to train for the combine and for their pro days. So for the next 2 to 3 weeks or so, after the combine is over, or the guys who didn't get combine invites, this is what they're currently doing, is that they're at these training facilities and they're continuing to prepare for something that they only do once in their lifetime. And that is run 40s, run these 5-10-5 shuttles, run a 3-cone, and do all of this stuff that you only do at the combine and you only do at your pro day. So then the pro day gets here. Let's say you're a guy who tested pretty well, like Brandon Dorless. He ran a pretty good 40 time, ran an exceptional 10-yard split off of that 40, looked good in the 3-cone, one of the few guys who actually tested in the short shuttle as well. He's probably going to go back to Eugene after training and sit out some of those drills. Because you hear Daniel Jeremiah and Rich Eisen on the broadcast. You hear them say, oh, these guys made money today. Well, yeah, their agents are advising them to sit out and not perform at their pro day. Well, let's say you're one of the guys who maybe tested poorly today. You're going back in training and saying, okay, I know what I have to prepare for. Oh, I underperformed in the 40-yard dash. Well, I'm going to go and continue to train for the 40. I didn't run my shuttle. Well, I'm going to go to my pro day and run the shuttle. Because at the pro day, it's not as televised. It's not as corporate. It's more the scouts are there, and they are going to basically force these guys to run these drills, like it or not. They may have sat out for this big corporate advertised event, but these guys are probably going to be forced to run. I've actually been at pro days where longtime scouts have gotten on guys because they wanted to sit out. They thought they were bigger than testing. No, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. If the scouts don't see you, who's going to go to the GM and put their name on the line and say, oh, this guy who I didn't see test, yeah, let's go and draft him. Well, the guys that didn't have the opportunity to test at the combine, their pro day is it. That's it. That's the one opportunity that they have, and maybe an opportunity at the National Scouting Combine, which just came and went. But outside of that, once the pro day gets here, these guys are never going to train for these events ever again. It seems ridiculous, but these training centers like Exos, these guys make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's such a big industry. And one of the things that we always ask guys down at CGS, because it's right after their season ends, they come off of these bowls, and it's their first week really into training. And we look at them and said, where are you guys training at? Where are you training out of? Because they're not at school. The semester's over. They're not going back home. They're getting ready for these events. Well, now that these events are over, what do? Well, they're staying in shape. They're starting to get ready for the draft. But after this, a lot of these guys are never going to do any of these events ever again. It's like trigonometry, really. I remember in high school, I said, when am I ever going to use this again? Well, frankly, when are these guys ever going to use a lot of this again? When are a lot of these big guys ever going to have to vertical jump as high as they ever had? Or broad jump like they did today? Those are things that are in a vacuum. It's more track-based. It's more science-based. It's more data-based. The stuff that you can't put a value to, the on-field testing, that's the stuff that the scouts can then take back after today, and they can formulate more of an opinion, add it into the puzzle, because after the pro day, there's nothing else. It's then the draft. The combine, this was the last to second to last slice of pizza for a lot of these guys. After that, the box is empty, and then it's time for the National Football League. But that's what makes this part of the year fun, is that you can truly see who put in the time, who is an athlete that could just really pick up and do anything. I mean, Chop doing what he did today is absurd. Weighing in at 250 some odd pounds and running that split that he ran, running a 4.44. These guys are insane athletes. They're getting quicker and quicker every single year. They're getting more freakish every single year. And that's why the NFL does this event, is because it's a spectacle. And at the end of the day, you might get caught up in all these numbers, but enjoy it. It quite literally is an entertaining sport. And this is the sports entertainment element of it. This is the closest you get to like a WWE feel, in my opinion, where you're so far removed from the actual game of football, but you're still putting on an entertaining product, because at the end of the day, these guys they're freak athletes. I mean, heck, you could watch these guys just do anything. I mean, playing a charity softball event, and it's fun, right? So today, tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, take in just the freak athleticism. Seeing guys like Byron Murphy at their weight jump like they did, and seeing guys like Chop Robinson that I had already mentioned run a 40 the way that they did, and seeing guys pop out like Jalyx Hunt, guy out of Houston Christian, all of a sudden puts together a good Senior Bowl, has a really good combine. Now, these pieces of the puzzle, does that start to help some of these guys, or does it start to hinder them? And we'll see as we continue to roll along. We'll be talking more combine. We got the premier days the next 2 days. We got tight ends and DBs tomorrow, Saturday. That's the big one. We got QBs, wide receivers, and running backs. We'll finish up with offensive line on Sunday. But speaking of finishing up, that'll do it for me here at the Locked On Eagles podcast. We will get back tomorrow. But until then, make sure you subscribe, like, comment. Make sure you're interacting with us on Twitter. You can catch me at GC24_football. Catch my co-host at DiBiase LOE. Make sure you are watching the Combine. Make sure you're tuned in to all of the coverage, no matter where you are in the world. If you're an Eagles fan or not, if you like football, if you like other sports, make sure you're tuned in here. And you're also tuned in at the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel that Locked On now has on YouTube, and the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here covering sports 24/7. The first of its kind Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app, where you can find us as well. You can find us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you for being an everydayer, and I'll finish it as I always do. Fly, Eagles, fly.